TV, your number one Christian channel.
Hello, good afternoon to everybody. Praise the Lord. Today again we're going to be looking at the issue of mental health and addictions. My name is Bernard Mwangi. We all remember that September is a mental health month, mainly dealing with suicide prevention. Remember, this month is a day that you'll reach out to everybody that you know is in need or is in trouble in one way or the other. Right. Okay, let us go down back to our topic at hand, which is the anatomy of addictions. The anatomy of addictions, last week we looked at a few things, and we looked at who is an addict, what is an addict. Basically, is a person who cannot live their lives without the use of drugs or alcohol or any compulsive behavior. And the objectives for today is we are to define the key terms found in addictions. The second one is to define the different types of addictions and also to describe the process of addictions. So good afternoon and welcome. I hope you all learned something new today. Because as the Bible says, our people died due to lack of knowledge. And here today we're going to dispense some knowledge that will help us along. So we're going to look at the definition of some key terms. The first one being, what is a drug? Basically, a drug is any substance that is absorbed into the body of a living organism, altering the normal body functions. But when you're looking at the context of drug addictions and alcoholism and this whole spectrum, you're looking at something that will change your mood. Something that will change your mood, that something will change how your body is functioning, how it's responding to outside stimuli. So the WHO said it's like any chemical substance which taken into the body alters its function physically or psychologically. And a writer called Krivonek also said any substance people consider to be a drug, with the understanding that this will change from culture to culture and from time to time. This brings in the understanding that the new drugs being manufactured each and every day to do different things to a person's body. And this person will use these drugs to derive pleasure from them. What is mainly used as drugs and alcohol, these are psychoactive drugs which interact with the central nervous system. So they affect how our mind works and our behavior, our perception of reality. That's why you hear that somebody who has used marijuana can be walking, it's like they're walking on air. But it's because their perception, what they're seeing, their depth perception is off. So they look like they're walking on air, going down. The next one is the level of alertness and the response to time and perception of the world. You'll find that some people use drugs and alcohol to change how they're reacting to things, to change how they're seeing things, to change. Basically, I have one story which, as a young person, I was in a matatu. I was outside Kenya Cinema, on this other side, a number 15 matatu, going to Langata. And there were these young boys, street boys, and they were sniffing glue. So two of them had stopped traffic, and they were looking up, and they were pointing. And they're saying, "Angalia helicopter, Angalia helicopter, Angalia helicopter, Angalia helicopter," and we're wondering what's wrong with these boys. But the thing is, they were looking at something that nobody else is seeing, so their perception of reality was very skewed. Walikuwa wanaona vitu zao. So they're looking at a helicopter which is supposedly coming to land there, and they had put traffic at 3:30 p.m. So you can imagine what the matatu drivers were thinking about them. One of the biggest issues is if people know drugs are bad for them, if they know alcohol can mess around with them, if people have all this information, why do they keep on using it? Why would they go out there and look at drugs and alcohol and even try to use them? And mainly, it's used for the pursuit of pleasure. The advertising industry gets a lot of money from advertising that alcohol and drugs are very, very pleasurable activities to get engaged in. So you'll hear it being advertised be akin to be like sex, that it is as good as sex or much better, or because you are drinking a certain brand or you're smoking a certain brand or something, you can get in contact with the other sex. You become much more attractive. It is also seen that most drugs and alcohol are also used in a social setting. So you find that most people, when they're seated down in a social setting, and for example, in the northeastern province, they're sitting down chewing miraa in the evening, it's mainly for pleasure. It looks like a very pleasurable activities. Most people who are drinking alcohol are seen to be in that cloud of euphoria. And the other motivating factors and conditioning factors are tunajiambiaga tunataka kusahau ka stress. You want to forget what happened today. You want to forget what has happened. The other is because it's for a specific purpose. You use a drug for a specific purpose. For example, I did not feel like facing these people sober. For example, there are a lot of musicians who have a hard time facing a crowd. So they'll find them using drugs and alcohol so that they can stand in front of a crowd and plus still add on shades and sing or perform. The other one is pleasure. The other one is psychiatric disorders. As we all know, 1 out of 4 people with psychiatric disorders use drugs and alcohol, mainly as a means of relief. The next one is socio and educational disadvantages. Research has been shown that areas which lack social amenities, and mainly we're talking about the slum areas, you find that very many people have issues of lacking special areas whereby they can go and have fun, whereby they can go and meet their peers. So they'll find themselves engaging in these drug-taking activities which do not need a lot of space. All they need are hidden corners. These are the places whereby they will go and sit down and, as the Englishman said, misery loves company. So they can go down and sit and wallow in their misery. Most initiation into drug activity begins with experimental use. So each and every person who mainly started out in drugs and alcohol will all say, I heard about this from a friend, or I saw a friend using this and that, and I wanted to see, what will this do to my body? What will this do to me for X amount of time? If I use this amount, what will it do to me? If I mix this drug and this drug, if I mix cigarettes and miraa, what will they do to me? If I mix alcohol and marijuana, what will it do to me? The next is peer pressure. Comes a certain age where the influence of the family over the child diminishes, and that is usually around the ages of 11, between 9 and 12, depending on the sex. If it's a female, earlier. If it's a male child, you're talking about around the age of 12. And from that time onwards, it's a peer set that holds the biggest influence in your child's life. And you find that even they are mixing up with the wrong crowd, the so-called wrong crowd, they will push each other to go across boundaries in terms of looking for their own identity. And they'll look for that identity through the use of drugs and alcohol, or one will want to get recognized in a certain social set. Kama sisi ni wale wanoma, sisi ni wale wana, sisi ni wale tunavutanga vitu, sisi ni wale tunachuna vitu, sisi ndo wale wezi, sisi ndo wale. So you'll find that this person, because he or she wants to fit into a certain social group, they will use drugs and alcohol to fit into it. During the year 2012, NACADA did a rapid assessment, and And they were looking at the young people aged between the age of 15 to 24, and you find that nearly 12% were already using alcohol. Half of that were using tobacco and miraa, and 1.5% of these people were using marijuana. We want to look at a term that you hear around being used a lot, drug abuse. And mainly we look at this term very openly and we do not really know the meaning. And you find that it is the misuse of a substance. Now, very many people use Piriton for sleep. Piriton is an antihistamine used to deal with allergies, but you'll find that somebody, mi sishikagwi na kausigizi siku hizi, so asha ni kunywa taka Piriton ni tayari. And you find that Piriton is medication for allergies, but one of the side effects is that it will induce sleep. There is also the part whereby a person is also misusing a substance or overusing a substance. This is whereby the person takes the drug for an extended period of time than it was prescribed for. The other second meaning is we use some drugs as a society, either from a way that it was generally used, either medically or socially. You'll find that some people have started using over-the-counter medication. We're talking about cough syrup, we're talking about sleeping pills, we're talking about benzodiazepines. Instead of using them for the work they were manufactured for, they're now using them for leisure or pleasure. Another definition of abuse is when we're using an illegal substance. In Kenya there's a Psychotropic Drugs Act. Kuna sheria inayosema kwamba kuna mihadarati yenye hufai kutumia na kila mihadarati iko na wakati wake wa kufungwa. Pia, as a Kenyan, you need to know that if you are below the age of 18, you cannot purchase and use alcohol. But how much is that law adhered to? Lastly, amongst the definitions of abuse is we use the substance in a manner or in amounts in a situation that the drug causes problems or greatly increases the chances of problems occurring. And you find that these persons use, let's say, an overdose of pain medication. They do not want even to feel a modicum of pain. Yani hata ile uchungu, hata ile kidogo ikako, ile kuonyesha uko hai, they do not want to feel it. So every time they feel, a headache is coming, they use the strongest medication ever instead of going for the smaller brand names, something like Headaches. They go and use a very strong painkiller that may be used in theater. And basically that, if you look at it, there are people who have overdosed through such abuse. And we're talking about some people like Michael Jackson. He mixed up so many medications, very strong medications, much more than he was supposed to be using for that particular problem that he had at that particular time. And you find that he was using a very strong painkiller, a very strong pain medicine that is mainly used during surgeries to keep him asleep. And you could look at his age, he was in his 50s. So his body could not manage using all these drugs and substances in his body. And sadly, he overdosed and he died. So when you're looking at the substance abuse, we're talking about when you're looking at it from a clinical aspect, it is defined as a maladaptive pattern of substance use leading to clinical insignificant impairment and distress manifested by one of the following over a 12-month period. When we're looking at addictions or anything dealing with addictions, we sit down with a person, and when we're doing diagnosis, you're looking at the last 12 months. What has been happening in the last 12 months? So you find that one of the first criteria that this person has to meet is there's an issue at work. Issues at in anything to do with responsibilities. There might be neglect, there might be lack of being able to meet the responsibilities that the person has. Secondly, the person is continuously using drugs and alcohol even under circumstances where they are contraindicated. For example, ukiambiwa usikunywe pombe na upeleke gari. A lot of us have heard that. Do not take certain medication and operate heavy machinery. The next one is getting issues which are related to substance abuse. I was talking to a very senior prisons officer sometime 2 weeks ago, and he was saying other than half of the men in prisons in Kenya have either of these two issues. Number one, they come from broken homes, and the next one is they have substance-related issues. For example, they got into a fight when they could not control themselves because their thinking patterns were impaired due to drugs and alcohol. Or waliangusha gari wakiwa wamelewa. Or somebody stabbed the other one because they were drunk. And lastly, continued substance use despite having persistent or recurrent social or interpersonal problems. For example, a person may be having a problem whereby if they drink alcohol, they will start crying. This is a social problem. Imagine you're seated in a bar or in a social setting. Remember that alcohol is a depressant. So when this person takes the drug, alcohol is a drug. When this person takes alcohol, they start sitting back, then they start crying because it triggers off, maybe they're triggered off by maybe a relationship issue or something, and the person just starts going, where people are supposed to be jolly. That is a social problem. And tomorrow, you remind him, hey, my friend, ulikuwa unalia mbele ya watu, ni nini? The person sits there, then he starts crying again. He'll continue drinking again. 2 weeks down the line, the person is drinking and crying, drinking and crying. The other time, because now people have started laughing at him, he's starting to fight them. That is a very, very big definition of what abuse is. And we need to look at the next step, which is dependence. Dependence is whereby there is a physiological and psychological state of adaptation to the drug or to the activity, necessitating that there is a continued administration to prevent appearance of withdrawal symptoms. Now, this happens mainly in the later stages of addiction, whereby the person's body and the mind are now really, really dependent on the drug for survival. Now the body has shifted its sustenance from food for normal functioning to drugs and alcohol or a certain behavior. So I find that for dependence to happen, there needs to be a few things that happens. So the first one is tolerance. Tolerance is whereby if you look at in the last 12 months, if you used to drink 3 beers to get a certain feeling, but now you need 6 beers to get that feeling again, it means that your tolerance has gone up. Or you can be using marijuana for a certain amount of period. First year, second year, third year, it stops being as strong as it used to be. So you can decide, do I shift from this marijuana, do I shift to heroin, do I shift to a stronger drug, or do I need to start mixing it with alcohol? The second manifestation of dependence is withdrawal. Withdrawal is whereby the body reacts to lack of the substance being therein. We know intoxication. Intoxication ile kulewa, zimeshika. You're there hanging, I'm feeling very nice. But no, this is the opposite. When the body lacks the alcohol or the drug in the system, or a particular you start manifesting a particular behavior or physical manifestations. Either, for example, for the alcoholics, it's the shakes, the headaches, there is a nausea, the stomach cramping, diarrhea, sweats, even at extreme times hallucinations, lack of sleep. And you find that a lot of drug use or alcohol use happens in the last stage of addiction is mainly to relieve or to avoid withdrawal symptoms, because these ones can be so bad, so bad, they can actually kill. Actually, the withdrawals for alcohol are much worse than the withdrawals for heroin. People hear about heroin and they think, wow, this drug is very bad. Have we thought about the legal ones? The ones that the government is getting tax from. The most dangerous drug in the world actually is alcohol. And it actually kills much more people than we think. The third one is we start using the drugs and the alcohol in very large amounts and for a longer period than we expected. There are these so-called normal people who can go have 2-3 beers. They watch the news, talk with their friends, watch the game, if it was Arsenal or Manchester or Chelsea or poor Barcelona, and they go home. But for the person who has started to become dependent, they will watch the game, they will watch another game, they will watch another game, they will drink more than the 3 beers, and they'll find themselves have spent the whole night, they were locked in the bar, and they were open when the bar was getting washed. That's the time the person is going home. The other one is a person becomes desiring change in their lives, that you want, nataka kukata hii maneno, kukata maji, sitaki kuvuta hizi vitu, I want to quit. I want to cut down. I want to now start controlling my drinks. I now even want to start controlling my environment. I want to even start controlling who I hang around with. But unfortunately, it is very unsuccessful. And you find that next point looks at now the use of these substances or getting into these activities starts taking a very large amount of the person's time. It becomes a career. Instead of going to work to get money so that one can enjoy themselves in leisure activities, one starts going to these leisure activities, so-called leisure activities. It can be food addiction, sex addictions, can be crime, can be anything, can be drugs. Then it becomes the opposite. They start going to steal instead of going to work. They start going to eat instead of going to work. They start going to use drugs and alcohol instead of going to work. Instead of food, they start engaging in these activities. And worse it gets is the other activities that a person needs to be engaged in their society. They need to attend weddings, they need to attend funerals, they need to become fathers, they need to become mothers, they need to become employers, employees. These ones start to get a back seat to these activities that they're getting engaged in. The getting and the using of the addictive substances or behaviors. And the worst of all is somebody knows, hii pombe ni mbaya, hii pombe ni mbaya, but the persistent use continues. Hiyo pombe ni mbaya sana. Starts giving themselves excuses. Nitawacha kesho. Tutawacha kesho. Nitawacha kesho. And they forget. For example, a person may be having a very bad infection. Or a good example will be a person having a stomach ulcer. And every time they drink alcohol, they end up throwing up blood or passing blood in their stool. But this person continues persistently saying, nitawacha kesho, nitawacha kesho, nitawacha kesho. Yes. We have now the issue about psychological dependence. We have physical dependence and psychological dependence. Psychological dependence is whereby the person's mind, the behaviors, are very tuned towards drugs and alcohol. For example, when you're looking at physical dependence and amongst cigarette users, this is whereby the people sit down and they say, before they eat, they need to smoke a cigarette. Before they go to the toilet, they need to smoke a cigarette. During that toilet activity, they will be smoking a cigarette, telling themselves it's an air freshener. And after the toilet activity, they will smoke another cigarette. After eating the food, they will smoke a cigarette. And they say without smoking that cigarette, the body functions will not happen. Now that is a physical dependence. If they try to do that without smoking that cigarette, it will be very, very hard, especially for those who wake up in the middle of the night so that they can smoke a cigarette so that they can go back to sleep. When they wake up, before the mind is usually very, very foggy. It is not working. But once they smoke a cigarette, their thoughts wake up. The CPU has booted up. But now psychological dependence, you're looking at another different thing. When this person is stressed out or they need to think, they will smoke the cigarette to deal with that issue. When they're very happy to celebrate, they will go and smoke the cigarette. But when people celebrate, what do? They shout, they scream in happiness, they go buy gifts. And most of us as Christians will thank God. But these people, they will go smoke a cigarette. That is what psychological dependence is. Now, when we're talking about psychological dependence, we're also talking about psychological withdrawal symptoms. You find that psychological withdrawal symptoms, when the person is not using or is not under the influence of the drug, they start to have issues. And this one is best manifested in our homes. Because I believe in each and every home, Kenyan home, there's somebody who drinks tea. Kuna mtu anakunywanga chai. Kuna thermos mzima ya chai iko hapo. If this person does not drink 2 cups of tea in the morning, hiyo nyumba ikaliki. Huo mtu iko na kisirani. If this person does not drink that coffee or that tea, they will not be okay. When visitors come in, the first thing that is placed on the table so that people can talk is tea. But it is mainly for that person who is brewing that tea so that they can be able to function. Now, we're going on forward, we'll look at now the withdrawal symptoms in general. We're talking about as we go on break, we'll finish up with this issue about withdrawal symptoms. You find that when the physical withdrawal symptoms are there, it's sweats, tremors, nausea, pain in the joints, confusion. Kuna wale watu wakikosa kunywa chai ama kahawa siku hiyo, mwili inaanza kuuma, kichwa inauma, amechanganyikiwa, hawezi concentrate. People who lack drinking alcohol for a certain amount of time, they have shakes, appetite hakuna, lazima kunywe kidogo ndo akule, and such things and such not. Now, when we come out from the break, we'll be looking at other issues such as tolerance, reverse tolerance, na tutaongea mengi zaidi kuhusiana na maneno kama hiyo. Asanteni sana. See you after the break.
Join Apostle Pamela B on your #1 Christian channel, JTV, every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. on your favorite program, Back to the Crossroads. to the crossroads.
Praise the Lord, my viewers. And that he did. Na akafanya hivyo.
Join Apostle Bernard Muchina on your number one Christian channel, JTV.
Ama wewe utasema, it is still early.
Abide in the Word.
Now they take the report back.
Every Tuesday from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
You are watching JTV, your number one Christian channel.
Welcome back to JTV, to the first season of the pioneering programs of We Do Recover. We're looking at mainly today is what is an addiction. And we are looking at what are the stages of addiction, what happens when a person becomes an addict, what are the common features in an addiction, etc., etc. And we were looking at withdrawal symptoms previously, and I'm going to move on to tolerance. Tolerance is whereby the person that we're talking about, that is an addict, or the person who's affected by the drug or of choice, is psychologically or behaviorally needs a higher dose after some time of certain activity or of the drug of choice, so that they can get the same amount of pleasure. Or the same drug that they've been using for a particular amount of time is not giving them the same pleasure as they previously experienced. And another term that we need to look at is also addiction. Addiction is a chronic relapsing disorder, behavioral disorder. It is also a brain disease. It is also a social disorder. It is also a spiritual issue. It covers over all spectrum of society. And you find that a major characteristic of addiction is by there is loss of control completely. Mtu amejiachilia na kajiachilia kabisa. Badala kukunywa pombe na mkunywa. Instead of using the drug has now started to take over each and every aspect of this person's life. Plus, there is an inability to stop their use completely. It means that this person not only has dependence on these things to help them not only sort life's issues, but also physically that they need this drug or this activity, that they're completely ensnared in, they cannot move forward. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, in Kenya, addiction is recognized as a mental illness. And 1 out of 4 adults with a mental illness has also a substance use disorder, which is also known as addiction. And you find that mainly the people who have mental health issues use drugs and alcohol so that they can get some relief. So sometimes lots of research is being done into what came before. Was it the mental health disorder, or was it the drug of choice which brought about the mental health disorder, or one was dormant but was brought to life by the other? So you're wondering which is which. But what we know very, very well is that drugs and alcohol, around 33 to 35% of all people who go for who get admitted into treatment facilities have mental health disorders. And a characteristic of breaking down, or a characteristic of addiction is cravings. Cravings ni ile tunasikianga naitwa taki. Unasikia taki ya sigara. Unasikia unasikia mkipia sana Drago diranga ro. Unasikia kiu. Naangalia chupa ya kitu ikisweat pale hivyo nasikia nataka kuikunywa. And you find that it is mainly through the elevation of this drug of choice or this activity. Unaiweka mali juu kama Mungu, yani kama Mungu kadogo, unakaangalia wewe unaitaka na unaitamani na roho yako yote. The next one is tolerance, which you have talked about. Persistent, you talked about dependence, which you have talked about earlier. And if you're able to look at the pictograph, there are 5 main groups of addictions. 5 main groups of addictions. Most people know about 2, and that is mainly the activity addictions and the substance addictions. Substance addictions, we are talking about the alcohol, the drugs, the nicotine, also talking about food. Food can be used as a drug. Food can be used as a drug. And you'll find that amongst the food addictions, there are about 3 or 4 different types of addictions just under food. You'll find that there is overeating. There is bulimia nervosa, whereby this person, because they want to maintain a certain body weight, they will eat, get the pleasure from the eating, but throw it up so that they can maintain that particular body weight. The next one is anorexia nervosa, whereby a person will not eat at all to punish their bodies, to keep it a certain size. They have a warped sense of how or what beauty is. The next and the last one is pica. This is where you find the most commonly it's amongst ladies who eat soil because they lack iron in their systems. You'll find that others chew bottles, chew nails, chew steel wool, swallow hair. That is what pica is. Swallowing very funny objects into their systems, and they get some pleasure out of it. Activity addictions, we mainly know about work, exercise, There are those people who get pleasure from spending, but the most growing addiction in the country is gambling. Statistics are yet to come in as to what or how bad gambling has reached. But in each and every small neighborhood in this country, you will find those funny small slot machines. They're called kanyonde. You put a 20 shilling and you roll it. You throw another 20 shillings, and that youth will just stand there the whole day, wakifinya two buttons, expecting something. Or you'll find some people sitting in a cyber cafe researching on funny teams in Lithuania for basketball, or football teams in Guangzhou. You can't even pronounce the names, but you want to bet on them so that you can get a return. And each time you place the bet, you feel there's a joy in the anticipation. There is also the joy in winning, the maximum joy that is there in winning. There is also, they even call the mathematical aspects of how to place a bet. It's nearly a whole science when somebody who's a gambler tries to explain to you, even when you're muting and as a pesa, najaribu naeka hii, nisichome bet. And there's another one, which is crime. A lot of people who are behind bars, it's because of the addiction to crime. We are talking about something as simple as shoplifting. Kuna mtu akiingia duka lazima atoke na kitu, whether amenunua, whether hajanunua. So you find that the shoplifting and the buying and spending zinapelekana hand in hand. So they'll do what is called a 5-finger discount. They will pickpocket somebody, ama wataiba kutoka hapo kwa duka. Shoplifting, but in a bigger form, it's called kleptomania. Now we'll move on to those addictions that people do not really know about. And one of them, we can look at them, is the people addictions. We're looking at relationships. We're looking at power. We're looking at violence. We're looking at love and sex. We're looking at codependency. There are these people who get power, and they have such a difficult time of letting it go. Power has run their lives. You can look at the case of politicians who will do anything, nearly anything, to remain in that seat of power. There is also sex. Or people will go to certain extremes and such devious activities to get the sex. And it starts as simple as access from the phone. You can access a lot of porn on your phones. You find that the person stops getting the normal pleasure from sexual activities with their partners, who I hope are their wives or husbands, and they start moving on to internet pornography. And even in that pornography, they start even moving to extremes. They start watching very weird pornography, which goes either very violent pornography, to get the same amount of pleasure that they were getting when they were having normal relations with their spouses. Then they move on to start even acting out now these things, these fantasies that they're watching on their phones. They start going to pay for prostitutes. They start, you find people now becoming rapists. People end up doing necrophilia, which is sleeping with dead bodies. And those are forms of sexual addictions. Codependency is whereby people are addicted to other people. And the best way to look at it is in an addict's family. You'll find that in very many people who have gone to rehab, one of the biggest issues that gets them to relapse is because their families were not treated when this person was in treatment. For example, everybody was conditioned to huu mzee akiingia nyumbani anapiga umbwa buti. Anakuja anabisha mlango, anakuja akiimba. So kila mtu alikuwa anaishi na tension. Ama wakisikia mzee anaimba na furaha, wanafurahi. Everybody was conditioned to this man being a mess. So they had somebody to talk about, somebody to castigate, mtu wa kudemonize kwa nyumba. Finally, the mzee went to rehab. Then he came back. Number one, he's home very early. Saa 10, saa za kuku kuingia, by 6 jioni, mwanaume yuko kwa nyumba. Bibi yake anashindwa, ai, so mimi ndio nilikuwa natawala hii nyumba. She has not moved with the man's times. So she falls into a very bad pattern of now to investigate what is the man doing at all times. The children also get into the other patterns. We will discuss codependency on another date, much more in depth. But you find that the family has not changed, but the person has changed. But they will push this person so bad that he goes back to his previous normal behavior, which is kukunywa tena, so that the family can go back to its normal. The next addictions grouping we can think about is thought addictions. This is where people are addicted to perfectionism, obsessional thinking, yani akili yake itokangi place fulani. Pesa, tengeneza pesa yangu, pesa yetu, pesa. The people who live in the fantasy world, anajijengea castles, and they sit up there throughout the day, and this person does not come to reality. Huku chakula inaungua, lakini mtu tuko wa fantasy land. Repetition. This mainly is whereby a person derives a sense of pleasure from repeating certain activities. They find it in psychiatric textbooks known as obsessive compulsive disorders, whereby a person repeats a certain things in certain order in order to get different results. If they're feeling pain, they can go and wash their hands 6 times and they think that will sort them out. You'll find some of them get into very bad behaviors, like even cutting. Every time they cut, they think that they have sorted out an issue. And the last one on that grouping is feelings addictions. And there are these people who are addicted to just their emotions: anger, rage, guilt, fear, etc., etc. And the people who ask, okay, sasa umetuonyesha hiyo, how comes these activities are addictive? Anything that can produce pleasure is addictive. And everything that can produce pleasure can also create a habit. They can also give you an acquired drive. We're now on the last stretch. We're going to be talking about the process of addictions. Kuna pale mtu anzia na mpaka pale anatumbukia kabisa. Now, there are stages which are the experimental stage, social stage, experimental stage, problematic stage, dependence and addiction. The last two are usually interchangeable or used as the same. So you'll find most people using 5 stages or 6 stages of addiction. The experimental stage is mainly due to people now experimenting for curiosity, hata kujibamba, thrill, adventure. Hapo ndo nasikia watu wanaulizana, ushawahi kunywa kale kitu kana kwa na chupa inakaa, kalifanya nisikie. Alafu unasema, wacha niicheki. And that is the biggest motive for experimental use. Wacha nisikie. The bodies are experimental labs for drugs and alcohol. Secondly, the second stage is called the social stage. This is whereby it is now socially acceptable. You have moved on from now experimenting. And most of the people who experiment are usually very, very young. They cannot sit down with adults to use. So I find that most adults that are using drugs or alcohol are in the social stage. They can drink, they can drug in a social setting. And you'll find most of the drugs that are used in a social setting are alcohol and tobacco. And increasingly of late, marijuana and cat, mira. Now, these people say, mina kunywanga ama natumianga hii kitu once in a short while. once a month. That's the time I go out, whether there's a company function, whether it's Christmas, it's New Year's, it is Easter, it is May Day, it is Labor Day. Nilienda kupatia mwili asante. And you find that the use, it's usually very, very minimal. It is not a use whereby the person gets blackouts or no. It is very, very minimal use. And you find that most people who are usually at the social stage can stop. In later programs, we'll be talking about what makes the addict different from any other human being. What is it that keeps this person in so deep in iniquity that most Christians we call it mtu anasinzi lakini hataki kutoka hapo. Ni nini hiyo imemshika hataki kutoka hapo? I will explain what makes a body of an addict different from any other so-called normal human being. And you find that most people will remain in this stage, but the others who have vulnerabilities, either in their genetics or social issues happened, the environment, or the genetics have an issue, or the psychological issues, they now become vulnerable to becoming worse. But also, there's also the aspect of certain drugs having a very, very strong sense of euphoria. We talk about things about like heroin, cocaine, crystal meth, and such drugs. The third stage is the instrumental stage, and this is whereby we start finding out, as addicts and alcoholics, they start to find out, hey, if I want to be happy, or if I want to be sad, or if I want to think, or if I want to deal with a certain issue, let me use this. I can manipulate my world using drugs and alcohol. I can manipulate what is happening inside here, in my mind, using drugs and alcohol. And this is the beginning of the ostrich effect. For those of you who do not know this ostrich effect, it is whereby an ostrich is being chased by a predator, saa zingine a lion, and then it drops its head inside an anthill. When it's digging its head inside the anthill, it forgets that the rest of the body is now exposed. The rest of the body, which actually is where most meat is. So you find that as addicts and alcoholics, they will use drugs and alcohol at this particular stage for them to now start manipulating what is happening around here, but not to deal with what is happening out there. This is where even it stops being social. The person does not want to sit with people when they're using. Ameanza kuwatoka, ameanza kuondokea. Hataki story mingi. This a person will find at the counter in the bar drinking alone. This a person will find carrying home the alcohol to use. And they're seated alone watching CNN, akisip-sip. This is a person who will use the marijuana smoking alone. This is a person who will buy miraa and chew it alone. Atashikisha hiyo mogoka peke yake pale kwa base. Ama anajitengeneza base mahali kwa kona ya compound. And the person's now life starts going down the drain. Maneno ma relationship, kudil na maadhe, father, bro, sister, dealing with work now starts to have an issue. Issues with finances start happening. Issues with the law start happening because there is safety in numbers. But if now you're using marijuana na una watu wa kukuangalilia kama polisi wanakuja, utashikwa. You start chewing miraa throughout the day or throughout the night and you do not have friends who will tell you, hey, kesho tunaenda kazini. Kinaanza kuumana. This is the beginning of what we call denial. Denial is a system whereby the addiction or the disease of addiction starts to get hold of a person by lying to the person that they do not have an issue. Yani wewe unanga shida. Unaanza kujiambia, mi huvuta bangi lakini si kama Umoshi. Mi huvuta bangi lakini si kama Onyi. Hawa kuvuta bangi yao iko kwa level ingine. And already in this stage of instrumental use, imefika mahali mpaka watu mtaani wameanza kunotice. Your family members have started to notice that you're having an issue. And there are two types of instrumental substance use. Kuna wale watu hujibamba. Kujibamba. Hii story tu ni ya kujibamba. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Huo mtu ni kuharibu, yuenda kuharibu. Use drugs and alcohol just to feel good. Just to feel great. For no particular reason other than that. Then there are others who use it to compensate for issues that are happening around them. Nimeboeka, niko na stress, having a bad day, the relationships are going badly. This is whereby the person will use this as compensatory use. We look at habitual use. Habitual use is whereby the symptoms of the codependency start to happen. And every time the person, whether they use or they do not use, they start having very, very bad withdrawal symptoms, concentration iko down, sitting still is an issue, sleeping is an issue, lifestyle becomes bad, the lifestyle inakuwa upside down. They now start using drugs and alcohol to deal with their lives instead of eating or going to work to deal with their normal issues. And person starts to have blackouts, they cannot talk about finances, they do not have a lifestyle, they have a drug style. There is no normal, they now have a new normal. They now move from the social strata. If they were first-class citizens, they now go down to live with people in the gutter. Juu huko ndo nasikia wanatoshea. Problematic stage is now the person is now preoccupied with drug use completely, to the extent they now wanapanga saa zile watalewa. Akiamka hiyo ndio kitu ya kwanza nafikiria. The lives are so out of control and the social dysfunction is now glaring. Ile mtu ameondoka mtaani kabisa. We talked about dependence earlier, which is a sixth step, whereby there's tolerance, physical dependence, and psychological dependence. Lastly, we look at the stage of addiction, whereby the person cannot face life without drugs and alcohol. They cannot control their use, and they will use notwithstanding whatever damage happens to their lives. They will avoid their friends and family, and mainly because even the language that they're speaking has changed. The places they're living has changed. If a person was living in Runda, they're now in Kibera. I'm not saying that people living in Kibera are bad, but no. This person living in Runda should still live in Runda. But their social life has gone down the drain. Their financial life has gone down the drain. They can only afford to drug and use to the expense of living in Runda. These persons cannot recognize the damage that is happening around them or the damage that they're doing to people. And one of the things that is very, very glaring is if this person was a very happy person, alikuwa naenda church, alikuwa nafanya hizi activities zinafresha watu, kwenda out, traveling, leaving the country, alikuwa msomi, all these activities I'll let go of. Now, next week we'll be looking at a different aspect of addiction. We may have a guest, we might not have a guest. If you have any questions or queries, send them to JTV. We thank you. In Jesus' mighty name, we thank you for all this information, for I know you will not forget it. Amen. See you next week.
Join Apostle Pamela B on your number one Christian channel, JTV, every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. on your favorite program, Back to the Crossroads. Back to the Crossroads.
Praise the Lord, my viewers. And that he did. Na akafanya hivyo.
Join Apostle Bernard Muchina on your number one Christian channel, JTV.
Ama wewe utasema, it is still early.
Abide in the word.
Now they take the report back.
Every Tuesday from 7:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
You are watching JTV, your number one Christian channel.
Usakai, ye te te ke te e ka